Uh, Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talamh Beo TV. Breeden Larkin here, and I'm just today going to interview my local senator. Was a councillor. Very happy. My first campaign for a politician.
Yay!
I always back a winner. I do say so. Actually.
Thanks so much, Frida. And honestly, just delighted. I'm telling you to have, I think the only project funded from East Galway was your project, Frida, under the Talamh Beo for Galway 2020. So that's some kudos. So I know we're doing it in a very different way, but it's still great that it's going ahead. So yeah, well done.
Oh, thanks very much, Ashley. And yeah, because I mean, it would have been a Galway 2020 obviously had a lot of bad luck this year. We're all in a very weird
Yeah.
part of our lives. So it is nice to have distraction like this and just discuss, different things. So with yourself, because we've always kind of, what we talked about before, we talked about farming because we're both from
Mm.
Ballinasloe, which is a massive
Yeah,
farming town. Like today would be fair day, you know.
I know.
Mhm.
That's right.
It's the
It's
first
it's
time.
sort of it is really tough, like, because we come from a town, like it's the county town, and there's a mart, and I suppose our, like, when I was growing up, it revolved, like, I remember Dad, and the happiness on a Saturday getting a good price at the mart. So like, it's a real connected, I suppose, way to grow up, because you're part of agriculture, but agriculture is such a big part of the town with the mart and everything else. So yeah, great way to grow up. But I suppose it does give a unique insight into farming in East Galway.
Well, definitely, and we both then understand the kind of, for better word, anthropological kind of reach of farming. It's
Yeah.
not just producing food; it's raising families. It's looking after nature and building local communities and local enterprises and stuff like that. And I suppose in terms of what I'm doing the green cert now. I know you did the green cert a few years ago. I won't say how long. How
Long,
long.
long, long time ago. But one of the first, I think it was one of the first few years when it was coming out, like, so I did it a long time ago. So I think it's very different now, but you'll have all the insights from the current one, Brita. So
Yeah, so I just, because it took me a long time to maybe do, but now the family farm is here, and I suppose it's time to just commit to the land. And I'm very happy at home, and I guess I'm interested in. I've worked for myself for a good part of my life now. I really enjoy, lots of different things, like from tour
yeah,
guiding to social care and stuff like that. So it would be really interested in marrying being a farmer with other things. So
yeah,
that's kind of brought my research to stuff like social farming, which I'll be doing that online now
yeah.
from the Social Farming Ireland, which is a great, really great organisation and a great concept, don't you think, the social farming itself?
Well, there is so much. I mean, I think we know, and I know from growing up on a small farm, that it's not sustainable, the income from farming, just to support a family. So I've always understood that there would always, my parents had second jobs. My mum was working, and my dad worked as well as both of them doing the farm. So I think that the model going forward is going to be that we'd be looking at off farm income. Like, how will that, be part of, what life is going to look like if you wanted to get involved in farming. And farming in some ways can be a vocation, and there's
Mm.
all different types of it. And the social farming, actually, I've only just started following Social Farming Ireland on
Yeah.
Twitter. I just saw them recently, so I suppose I have a little bit more to learn there, but I can only suppose that farming as a community, before having so much industry, isn't it funny, as a community you'd have that metal concept, but like summertime, all the families coming together to help each other out. Maybe social farming is going to bring some of that back. So yeah, I'd
Well,
like to
yeah,
learn more about that
it
too.
is pretty, like, it's quite broad, and there's a lot of opportunity there, because at the moment you would use, a lot of people use it. Service users would use it, for Brothers of Charity use it, like, a little bit of animal therapy. I have a friend who does it down in Kerry, and two people come and they feed the chickens and they clean out the
Ah,
chicken house. I was like, geez, you're getting them to do the shite jobs, but they just learn.
so this is the one. This is where
Yes,
you learn from the bottom up. But yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I just think that, isn't it wonderful to be able to have that, because people get so much from interacting with the animals and the land and nature. And sure, we're always talking about connecting back with nature, and sometimes it's going for a walk in the boglands or down along by the canal or out in a field, and it makes you feel so much better. But I think for people to get involved with the work on a farm, God, it's fantastic. And well done to the groups that are providing that facility as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Dune social farmer. I met them at the ploughing championships, and that's where I kind of got first to read about it. And it was a convent once upon a time, and they donated the land to
Okay.
this organization, and they started a social farm, and so you can veg growing as well. Like with their farm is on site the whole time, and they can cater for a lot more people. But they can branch out, and you can take a few people at a time. But it's lovely. It's really nice work, and so yeah, again, we're just talking about various enterprises the land can have. So little things like gloss. Now, I've learned a lot
Yeah.
about gloss over this
Yeah.
my Talamh Beo tour, because John Brennan knows everything.
Yeah.
So like having rare breeds. So I suppose
Mm.
farmers gloss is coming up again, and there is an opportunity there to
Yeah.
expand. Just little branch away into a different, small. It's almost
Yeah.
like
Like,
tweaking, to come away from heavy inputs on the land. And that's why I'm really interested in
yeah.
myself, because I feel like, there's a lot of it's a lot of production. Like Irish farming is, in the mainstream is very productive. And that's where like our talk today is about 10, 10,
Yeah.
20, and the land is on drugs, we kind of sideline, we call it, because it's more like, it's kind of intricate, that phrase, because there's a lot of people say the grass won't grow without it, but I really
Yeah.
dispute that, because the grass has been growing for thousands and thousands of years. So it is a product that we've
Yeah.
become reliant on as an industry.
Yeah, and I suppose, I mean, it's funny, you've mentioned a few different things there, like gloss. I suppose I would have known my own dad as a farmer was on the REP scheme, and I suppose gloss was the follow on from that. And it was about supporting more environmental measures. So, I suppose the practical experience I would have had of it was, growing more Irish broadleaf trees, in sections of the farm. When it comes to I suppose what you're speaking there about, like say fertilizer on the land and all of this and grass growth, like we are really much looking at farmers to look at sustainable and I suppose being smart, efficient farm production and grass growth, and that's really what's been promoted. I know I was on Shannon's site there a number of weeks back, and I think I was with Thomas Duffy, and he's the head of the Mochrana Farmer Group. And I remember just looking into his background. I wouldn't know him very well, but he spoke well on it. But his background was in sustainable farming, I think, and as well as agriculture. So I thought that was really interesting. But the challenge we have with the farmland, with reps and everything else, the reason that reps was brought about was to take animals off the land in the wintertime, because obviously they were ploughing up the ground. So at a very early stage, people were realizing that you can't just have immediate grass growth if the land has been, cattle have been on it all over winter. So there were measures put in place to encourage better grass growth. And I suppose just depending on the areas you live in Ireland, I mean, we're from very much a limestone area. So there's certain things maybe that the soil does need. But I suppose what would be interesting and I would like to know more about is what other ways can you encourage grass growth and reduce the reliance on, I suppose, some of the chemicals that you've mentioned there.
Well, yeah, that's what I was trying, researching as well. And with Talamh Beo, we have a little tomorrow. We'll be putting a few videos up, and I'm calling it the Hedge School of Farming, Hedge School Farming, like kind of stuff that I would like to have been taught about in the Green Cert, which is about soil health and mushrooms, like growing mushrooms, but soil
Yeah,
biology, basically biology more than chemistry. Like
yeah,
in a way, because we are reliant, like it may be the fast solution to growing grass, like, and granted I can understand why people got into it, because it's a good
yeah.
product, but the downside is that you're losing nutrients in the soil that are being depleted, that they would,
Yeah,
if allowed to recover and treated properly, they would generate them nutrients on their own. Like, I mean, this nitrogen, it makes up of most of the atmosphere, that an element. And so nitrogen fixers like clovers and legumes are not
interesting.
really encouraged in. I would love to see that more in swards of grass and stuff, because
Yeah,
it does monoculture. I feel, I just worry that grazing platforms and this idea of pushing kind of a bigger practice will not be sustainable, because of the fact that grass, it'll take more and more of this synthetic material to
yeah,
grow it. And there are problems with dead zones and like algae. I mean, there's algae in waters and sea cabbage now down in Cork. I mean, the runoff is stronger there because they have bigger dairy farms there. It does seem to be
Yeah.
the big grazing platforms. I mean, I'm not criticizing all
Yeah.
farmers or anything like that because I think they do a great job. I mean, that's why I think in Ireland's target to go 25% organic in the farm under the farm to fork is actually not that much of a transition for Ireland, especially the West. You know, I
Yeah.
see and like that with small farm little enterprises and stuff, you know, and if they put the cap money more into people who produce food, like the kind of not just the amount of stock, but really the amount of production on the farm. And that could include things like beekeeping and social farming, you know, that would be, or even,
Yeah.
you know, God forbid you employed someone. What a miracle, you know, maybe.
Well, there's apprenticeship schemes as well now, so there's lots of ways that you can take people on.
Even art
um,
studios, you know, turn one of the barns into a retreat, you know, for an artist or things like this. You know, there's great scope
yeah,
there for different variety of things. And but in terms of cap, it really has to come from that because that was the point. Cap, the point of cap to begin with was to help small farmers. But I feel like it feels like small farmers that I'm talking about are considered hobby farmers. You know, they're not really considered farmers under the Department of Agriculture because there's no horticulture at all in the Green Cert. You know, I found that very surprising.
well, I wasn't aware of that now, but I must admit I don't remember doing much on horticulture myself. It was a lot about grass management and understanding the soil, but not, I suppose, the horticultural side. But I suppose you've just covered a few different things there as
Yeah,
well,
I
and
always do that.
yeah, no, it's great. It just gives me a few seconds though to ponder because I'm like,
Yeah,
oh, which are the nicest, juiciest bits I want to go back to. But like the bit you talked about there about just different elements with farming, I really do want to encourage that because I do think off farm income or different types of income can help support somebody who really is passionate about doing farming. There's so many young people, maybe more so, traditional farming, but also exploring, like you're saying, horticulture there or beekeeping or using the space. They have a beautiful old farmhouse, that they've inherited in their families.
yeah,
And, could that space be rejuvenated? Because one thing we don't have an awful lot of in, regional areas and ourselves as well in Ballinasloe is that we don't have places to showcase art. Like you'll have artists in town and in Galway City as well, who give out about not having a place where they can have a permanent place to like a gallery, an art gallery or something like that. So there is a way to link all of those things in. But I suppose what a lot of families would be thinking about is how do we make it sustainable? How do we support myself and my family to, with this enterprise? And that's where the struggle and the pressure comes from. And I think that's what, people, I suppose when you're in a place, a good place, you have all the ideas flowing to you really easily. When you're under pressure and you're stressed, very hard to come up with these sorts of solutions maybe sometimes. And maybe that's where Teaga's advisory things come in.
Well, I absolutely agree with that. I think that, having the time to think, I'm really lucky to have that now because I'm here just, and I suppose in a holistic, I've reading a book about holistic land management now. And, it's about planning. I mean, there's a phrase, you plan it, but you probably be prepared to get it wrong, So it's
Yeah.
nature is always going to do what it's going to do, so,
Be
but I do,
flexible.
huh? Yeah.
Be flexible. Be
That's
flexible, Brita.
like a tree, bend like a
Yeah,
leaf,
exactly.
bend like a branch. But yeah, no, just about that, about horticulture. I suppose why I want to talk to you as a senator is because, like, I do feel that would make a great difference if people with small acreage, like I have friends who produce food for restaurants on a 5-acre farm, for example. They produce really good
Yeah.
quality, high density, nutrient dense food, and they're not recognized as farmers under the Department of Agriculture. Like, there's no drop down menu for horticulture, which, that really is disencouraging people from continuing on the farm, continue to produce food into local markets. They don't, if you're not a farmer, you're not eligible for any of the schemes. You're not, single farm payment is one thing, but even in terms of insurance, like that, getting public liability insurance so you could do social farming or a little on farm, whatever you want to do on farm because it's impossible to get insurance otherwise. So there's little things. Being a farmer it comes with a lot of extra, I suppose, things. So I really feel like that's a thing that could be discussed because
Yeah.
I can feel like that's with the La Via Campesina, with the peasant movement, like they talk a lot about that and they feel like that's why they started, because they were invisible under the eyes of the food producers, you know, but ironically they produce a lot of food, you know. So that's why I just wanted to discuss with you today, because I've been reading a lot about, I was going to discover that, and I was like, that's something that could be discussed, you know. And I talked about Maria as well, Maria Walsh, about that. So, you know.
That sounds really good. I mean, I suppose where this is where I'll have to do my own research as well on it. But I mean, the issue with insurance, I mean, maybe there are elements to that we can look at that would support people who were thinking going into horticulture. And maybe there's other support measures. Like I know Teagasc is an advisory group maybe for the traditional farming. But, you know, is there elements of that could be there to support people going into horticulture? Now, my apologies, I wouldn't know as much on the horticultural side, but very much see the importance of having farmers markets. I mean, look at how that takes off in our towns and villages. And I mean, that's been supported by probably, you know, local producers, and really, really important. And I suppose even organic producers, and we have our own favorite one as well in Ballinasloe, but you know, organic veg producers are, you know, doing a great job, and you know, they're getting qualifications, certificates, and being best in class at what they do. So yeah, very interested in how to support them. And definitely when it comes to insurance in all areas is so well, it's such a difficulty because there's a lack of competition. Probably there's a bit of a monopoly there, and I know that we are looking at legislation there to be brought in about insurance, and to look at the capping of different things. Now this is outside of farming area, but just insurance is an issue across many areas.
Well, yeah, it's just, I suppose it's just an example of like what benefits you can have to be in a registered farm. Is that something? But yeah, no, I really think, because in terms of inspiring people back to the farm, you know, because not everyone is inspired by big dairy and silage and slurry and beef cattle and all that. And you know, I mean, but we do need people to be on the farms, because there's people to mind. There's, you know, local shops to be stocked, and you know, all that. I mean, you need.
But it's a wonderful livelihood. I mean, it's a wonderful livelihood to be able to, you know, isn't it funny to be able to walk outside the door? Sometimes you just think about having to sit at your laptop all day or whatever, isn't, you know, you'd nearly think, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to, you know, have, you know, balance that, you know, have your farming or your horticulture as well as maybe, you know, some of the work that you'd be doing on the laptop as well. So it is all about balance, I think. And I suppose, I know, Brie, that you're discussing a lot of different things now with the event today. So all I can say to you and to anyone listening is, you know, bring those points to me, I suppose, as one of the public representatives, but any of your public representatives. But, you know, do sort of say, well, look, at this is legislation we'd like to look at. I suppose for some people, it's like, well, what does a senator do sometimes, you know, what is the Seanad? And I suppose to break it down for people, you have two houses of the Oireachtas, and then you have the Seanad, which is the upper house, and you have the Dáil, which is the lower house. And both sides can introduce legislation, so you can bring in bills. And I suppose that they're discussed, and then you can request amendments. And so that can be done in both houses. And the Dáil has, I suppose, more power and privilege in some areas in terms of drafting and moving legislation through. But eventually it will come into the Seanad. And again, there's a lot of discussion in the Seanad, and sometimes relevant points are raised. So I suppose that's the role, the legislative role that we would have is actually, is introducing bills, putting forward amendments, discussing and debating, and then finally voting on legislation and passing. As you've seen in the last few weeks, probably on the news, a lot of emergency legislation was passed to cope with the impacts from COVID, for example. But you know, that's where I suppose, as a public representative, that's my role, is to represent, you know, to represent the groups that come to me within reason, you know, and obviously that it would be something that is advantageous to the groups involved, so advantageous to farmers and to food production. And, you know, obviously with the Green Deal in Europe and the new climate action bill, you know, introduced by Minister Eamon Ryan yesterday. I mean, you can sort of see that there is a focus on how we have to reduce carbon, and we have to become more mindful about ourselves and, you know, how we behave as well as individuals. So, I mean, it's covering a lot of areas, but all I can say is, yeah, by all means, get in touch with me. It's aisling.dolan@oireachtas.ie, or get in touch with Breda. I'm sure she'll let me know. And I don't know if you have any other questions, Breda, but just to say thanks very much. I know you're timing these to be so short and succinct as well.
Yeah, succinct. Just get people talking, you know. Yeah, but that's great, actually. I mean, it's just about, I feel like I'd love to do a proper good festival or forum on how to inspire young people to farming, because the succession rates, they all know, are really low. And
Yeah.
I would love to see farmers held up as high esteem as a doctor or a vet, like, because they're producing food, and
Yeah.
it's a great career to get into. So, but
It's a vocation, and it
yeah,
is something. Like, I mean, I must admit, like, if I could, any child had grown up, you couldn't have chosen better, I think, than growing up on a farm. Although a lot of extra work, a
yeah,
lot of extra work,
farmers
but
still know how to work.
we'd know that. Good work ethic, Breda. Good work ethic. But yeah, I do look at. I think to encourage people to get into farming, yeah, I'd be really happy to support any measures with that. I think you said you were speaking with our MEP Maria Walsh as well. I know she's very supportive,
Yeah,
particularly for young people getting involved.
yeah, like
And
young people in farming, women in farming, whatever it takes, just to get the kind of conversation going. Women in farming, I'd love to get, is a great forum, because
yeah, yeah, yeah.
just to encourage, because obviously in Ireland there's masses of people own
Yeah.
land, mostly are male, and it's just I think 80% of the women in the world grow food, but 90%, 92% of the land is owned by men.
Wow.
That's a kind of a
I didn't know
global.
that.
Yeah.
That's a really good statistic. Okay, there, I'll have to remember that one now.
Yeah, Livia Campesina
um,
are a great organisation, Livia Campesina, and maybe we'll
okay,
discuss. Maybe again we can discuss, because I need to learn more about this myself. The United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Peasants, and that's
okay,
been passed. And there's a
okay.
lawyer in Galway, I heard rumor that somebody works on this here in Ireland. So that's something I really need to. And that
Very
also
good.
will tie into maybe legislation to help small peasant farmers. I know they like the word peasant, but it comes from a
I
French
think,
French
yeah,
word
yeah,
movement of
Campania, yeah. I
yeah.
think maybe we might need a different word in English, maybe, all right. It's got
I need to,
some negative connotations.
I did say that at the meeting, and when got in Brussels
Yeah.
that time, I did say maybe come up with a
But
word.
the idea that, isn't it funny? To my mind, isn't it funny? Like that word would make me think that the person doesn't own the land, or is paying rent to a landowner, probably from our history, from our
Maybe from our
background.
history, that's right, because but some of them are looking for access to land, would be, yeah, not landowners, but some are really very small enterprises, but
Yeah.
peasant is come from the Pegia. I think it's a French thing, but anyway, but you can look more
Oh,
into
very
that.
good.
But thanks, Min and Ashley, that's really good. We'll
Oh,
stop there, and conversation will continue. So.
thank you. Thanks very much, Brita. Thanks, everybody.